Prologue, Chapter 3, Part 1 of Armadale. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Armadale by Wilkie Collins. Prologue, Chapter 3, The Wreck of the Timber Ship, Part 1. Read by David Barnes. No one answered the doctor's knock when he and his companion reached the antechamber door of Mr. Armadale's apartments. They entered unannounced, and when they looked into the sitting room was empty. "I must see Mrs. Armadale," said Mr. Neal. "I decline acting in the matter unless Mrs. Armadale authorises my interference with her own lips." "Mrs. Armadale is probably with her husband," replied the doctor. He approached a door at the inner end of the sitting-room while he spoke, hesitated, and, turning round again, looked at his sour companion anxiously. "I am afraid I spoke a little harshly, sir, when we were leaving your room," he said. "I beg your pardon for it with all my heart. Before this poor afflicted lady comes in, will you excuse my asking your utmost gentleness and consideration for her?" "No, sir," retorted the other harshly, "I won't excuse you. What right have I given you to think me wanting in gentleness and consideration towards anybody?" The doctor saw it was useless. "I beg your pardon again," he said resignedly, and left the unapproachable stranger to himself. Mr. Neal walked to the window and stood there with his eyes mechanically fixed on the prospect, composing his mind for the coming interview. It was midday. The sun shone bright and warm, and all the little world of Wildbad was alive and merry in the genial springtime. Now and again heavy waggons with black-faced carters in charge rolled by the window, bearing their precious lading of charcoal from the forest. Now and again, hurled over the headlong current of the stream that runs through the town, great lengths of timber loosely strung together in interminable series, with the booted raftsmen, pole in hand, poised watchful at either end, shot swift and serpent-like past the houses on their course to the distant Rhine. High and steep above the gabled wooden buildings on the river-bank, the great hillsides, crested black with firs, shone to the shining heavens in a glory of lustrous green. In and out, where the forest footpaths wound from the grass through the trees, from the trees over the grass, the bright spring dresses of women and children, on the search for wild flowers, travelled to and fro in the lofty distance, like spots of moving light. Below, on the walk by the stream side, the booths of the little bazaar that had opened punctually with the opening season showed all their glittering trinkets, and fluttered in the balmy air their splendour of many-coloured flags. Longingly, here, the children looked at the show. Patiently, the sunburnt lasses plied their knitting as they paced the walk. Courteously, the passing townspeople, by fours and fives, and the passing visitors, by ones and twos, greeted each other, hat in hand, and slowly, the crippled and the helpless in their chairs on wheels came out in the cheerful noontide with the rest, and took their share of the blessed light that cheers, of the blessed sun that shines for all. On this scene the Scotchman looked, with eyes that never noted its beauty, with a mind far away from every lesson that it taught. One by one he meditated the words that he should say when the wife came in. One by one he pondered over the conditions he might impose before he took the pen in hand at the husband's bedside. "Mrs. Armadale is here," said the doctor's voice, interposing suddenly between his reflections and himself. He turned on the instant and saw before him, with the pure midday light shining full on her face, a woman of the mixed blood of the European and the African race, with the northern delicacy in the shape of her face, and the southern richness in its colour, a woman in the prime of her beauty, who moved with an inbred grace, who looked with an inbred fascination, whose large languid eyes rested on him gratefully, whose little dusky hand offered itself to him in mute expression of her thanks, with the welcome that is given to the coming of a friend. For the first time in his life the Scotchman was taken by surprise. Every self-preservative word that he had been meditating but an instant since dropped out of his memory. His thrice impenetrable armour of habitual suspicion, habitual self-discipline, and habitual reserve, which had never fallen from him in a woman's presence before, fell from him in this woman's presence, and brought him to his knees, a conquered man. He took the hand she offered him, and bowed over it his first honest homage to the sex, in silence. She hesitated on her side. The quick feminine perception which in happier circumstances would have pounced on the secret of his embarrassment in an instant failed her now. She attributed his strange reception of her to pride, to reluctance, to any cause but the unexpected revelation of her own beauty. "I have no words to thank you," she said faintly, trying to propitiate him. "I should only distress you if I tried to speak." Her lip began to tremble. She drew back a little, and turned away her head in silence. The doctor, who had been standing apart, quietly observant in a corner, advanced before Mr. Neal could interfere, and led Mrs. Armadale to a chair. "Don't be afraid of him," whispered the good man, patting her gently on the shoulder. "He was hard as iron in my hands, but I think by the look of him he will be soft as wax in yours. Say the words I told you to say, and let us take him to your husband's room before those sharp wits of his have time to recover themselves." She roused her sinking resolution, and advanced half-way to the window to meet Mr. Neal. "My kind friend the doctor has told me, sir, that your only hesitation in coming here is a hesitation on my account," she said, her head drooping a little, and her rich colour fading away while she spoke. "I am deeply grateful, but I entreat you not to think of me. What my husband wishes—" Her voice faltered. She waited resolutely, and recovered herself. "What my husband wishes in his last moments, I wish too." This time Mr. Neal was composed enough to answer her. In low, earnest tones he entreated her to say no more. "I was only anxious to show you every consideration," he said. "I am only anxious now to spare you every distress." As he spoke, something like a glow of colour rose slowly on his sallow face. Her eyes were looking at him, softly attentive, and he thought guiltily of his meditations at the window before she came in. The doctor saw his opportunity. He opened the door that led into Mr. Armadale's room, and stood by it, waiting silently. Mrs. Armadale entered first. In a minute more the door was closed again, and Mr. Neal stood committed to the responsibility that had been forced on him, committed beyond recall. The room was decorated in the gaudy continental fashion, and the warm sunlight was shining in joyously. Cupids and flowers were painted on the ceiling. Bright ribbons looped up the white window curtains. A smart gilt clock ticked on a velvet-covered mantelpiece. Mirrors gleamed on the walls, and flowers in all the colours of the rainbow speckled the carpet. In the midst of the finery and the glitter and the light lay the paralysed man, with his wandering eyes and his lifeless lower face, his head propped high with many pillows, his helpless hand laid out over the bedclothes like the hands of a corpse. By the bedhead stood, grim and old and silent, the shrivelled black nurse, and on the counterpane, between his father's outspread hands, lay the child, in his little white frock, absorbed in the enjoyment of a new toy. When the door opened, and Mrs. Armadale led the way in, the boy was tossing his plaything, a soldier on horseback, backwards and forwards over the helpless hands on either side of him, and the father's wandering eyes were following the toy to and fro with a stealthy and ceaseless vigilance, a vigilance as of a wild animal, terrible to see.